Welcome to this explainer on the Epstein files. We're going to cut straight through the noise, the endless rumors, and the overwhelming gossip to get to the bottom of the true mechanics of power and institutional failure at the heart of this case. By the end of our time together, you won't just know the sensational headlines. You're actually going to understand the exact machinery of how influence operates in the real world.
When you hear that name, you probably immediately picture a single high-profile celebrity crime story. And it's incredibly easy to treat these types of cases like a movie, right? One central villain, one simple, tidy ending. But what happens if you look wider? Think about it like looking at one single shop in a busy, crowded market lane. If you only stare at that one shop, you completely miss how the whole lane actually works and who's pulling the strings behind the scenes.
So, let's just dive right into it. This was never just one isolated event. It's a system. What we're really looking at is a massive collision of wealth, power, allegations, and institutions all intersecting in one specific place. Because a person can commit harm, power can protect that harm, and institutions can fail to stop it. This case is so crucial because for over a decade, all three of those things collided in plain sight.
To truly map out this complex web, we're going to physically zoom out, layer by layer through 5 critical areas. We'll hit the core, alleged harm, the shield of wealth and power, the uneven legal response, what happens when institutions actually fail, and finally, the crisis of public trust.
Okay, let's start with Section 1, the core, alleged harm. This is the undeniable foundation of the case. We absolutely have to start at the center, because if we ignore the base of the building, everything else just kind of floats in the air. A lot of public discussion about this starts way too late. People love to jump straight to the celebrity connections or those sprawling conspiracy theories. But before the flight logs and the high-profile names ever dominated the news cycle, there were real lives disrupted. The unignorable foundation of this entire system was the allegations of serious crimes committed against vulnerable girls and young women. The whole story makes absolutely zero sense unless we center that human cost first.
Moving out to our second concentric circle, Section 2, the shield of wealth and power. Let's look at how privilege literally slows down consequences.
This piece isn't so much about the crime itself, but the environment that protected that center. We naturally expect the law to behave like a perfectly fair scale, right? The same facts go in, the same treatment comes out. But I want you to think of this environment like a highly exclusive, gated apartment complex. The outside rules are technically the exact same for everyone, but those living inside, they have vastly better security and deep entrenched connections. That gate doesn't make someone innocent, but man, it allows them to hire private intelligence, silence witnesses, and make their problems vastly easier to delay and much, much harder to report.
And power isn't just money. It's an entire multi-layered web. Sure, money buys that initial access, but status provides a false credibility that actually makes people second-guess victims. Connections provide this invisible shield of protection. Influence actively shapes how others behave around you. And institutional familiarity, like knowing exactly which high-priced defense lawyers used to work alongside the local prosecutors, well, that lets people move through legal systems with almost zero friction. If you're outside the circle, filing a complaint feels like hitting a brick wall. But if you're inside, that exact same complaint becomes a quiet conversation, a scheduled delay, or a private arrangement. Power doesn't usually break the scale of justice outright. It just places a really heavy, subtle thumb on one side so the balance looks completely normal from far away.
As we zoom out to the third layer, we hit Section 3, the uneven legal response. This is exactly what happens when that scale has a thumb on it.
There was a massive disconnect here, and it completely outraged the public. In a clean, textbook version of justice, an accusation leads directly to an investigation, which leads to charges, and finally open court outcomes. It's supposed to be a straight line, but the reality we saw here was entirely different. The public watched these controversial non-prosecution agreements, highly unusual secret plea deals, and incredibly low transparency, especially going back to 2008. Think of it like a school disciplinary system. The rules are plainly written on paper, but the student with the strongest family connections quietly gets extra warnings and closed-door meetings instead of detention. Even if the rules are technically on the books, everyone eventually starts to notice that they aren't being applied equally.
Let's move to our fourth layer, Section 4, when institutions fail, the broken plumbing of the system.
Because at this point, the story is no longer about one man. It's about a massive breakdown of the very institutions meant to protect society. Every institution is supposed to be a checkpoint to interrupt harm. Police are meant to thoroughly investigate, prosecutors objectively decide the charges, courts fairly judge facts, jails hold people securely, and the media? They're supposed to ask the hard, uncomfortable questions. Politics should remain completely separate and never ever distort justice.
In a healthy system, these distinct bodies act as circuit breakers. But here, multiple circuit breakers seemingly failed all at once.
And the really crucial point to understand is that institutional failure wasn't necessarily some dramatic, cinematic cover-up with people shouting in smoky back rooms. Actually, scratch that. It was mostly just heavily bureaucratic. It was born from deeply routine issues: delayed responses, limited transparency, incredibly narrow investigations that just refused to look wider, weak follow-ups, and honestly a very ordinary, very dangerous discomfort around challenging powerful people. It's exactly like a building where every individual floor is technically labeled fine by the inspectors, but the fire exits are quietly blocked and the alarms are literally unplugged. When you put them together, mundane, routine failures compound to create massive systemic danger.
Finally, we zoom out to the macro impact in Section 5, the crisis of public trust and the lasting damage to society.
All of this culminated in a deeply frustrating gap in the story. Remember, when Epstein died in custody back in 2019, before a full trial could even happen, it totally deprived the public of a clear courtroom ending. And human beings, we naturally hate gaps. We reflexively fill them with theories. But if you look beyond all the endless theories, trust is fundamentally a bank account. And the public watched as this wildly uneven system seemingly drained that account completely dry over a decade. Every single delay, every silence, and every unequal outcome was a massive withdrawal. The case permanently became a symbol, an ongoing test of whether justice can actually reach into elite circles without bending to accommodate them.
So, let's tie this all together. Here is the foundational skeleton of what you really should take away from this explainer. The entire case began with real alleged abuse. It grew into a sprawling issue because immense power surrounded and insulated it. It survived for as long as it did because the legal and institutional responses were severely incomplete. And it still matters deeply today because it permanently changed how we collectively view accountability. Seeing this structural skeleton is what allows you to look past all the tabloid gossip and analyze the actual machinery of power in our society.
Ultimately, understanding this whole system leaves us with one deeply provocative question, and it's a question you can carry into literally every future discussion about privilege, wealth, and justice. Can the law truly restrain power when power is highly concentrated? The next time you see a story where influence suddenly changes how an investigation is handled, you're going to know exactly what to look for. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking those hard questions.